Good morning. My name is Pranjal Pratim Bora, currently studying in Tezpur University at the Department of Food Engineering and Technology. I have been assigned by our respected R.K.Duary sir to discuss a few points on Codex alimentarius in food sector. So let's start through understanding the Codex. Now the introduction part. What is Codex alimentarius? Codex alimentarius is a group of international food standards adopted by Codex Alimentarius Commission and uniformly presented, meaning food law or legal food code. The Codex Alimentarius standards cover all basic food types, raw, semi-processed and processed, that are intended for the distribution to the customers. Now, the Codex Alimentarius international food standards, guidelines, and codes of practice contribute to the safety, quality, and fairness of the international food trade. The Commission, also known as CAC, is the central part of the joint FAO or WHO to protect consumer health and promote fair practices in food trade. The regulations of the Codex refer to food hygiene and quality, including microbial standards, food additives, pesticides and residues from veterinary drugs, contaminants, food labeling and marketing, etc. Like some of the principles which the Codex Alimentarius have to follow, like this purpose of the Codex Alimentarius, the scope, the nature, or the revisions. By following the program of work of the Commission is funded through the regular budgets of WHO and FAO, with all work subject to approval of the two governing bodies of the parent organizations. Now move on to next slide. Codex Alimentarius. Codex Alimentarius ensures that products compiling with Codex standard can be sold on the international market without compromising health or interest of consumers. Codex standards ensure product is safe internationally. Review of member laws is internationally accepted scientific and technological standards. Like many international organizations help Codex develop its standards, like International Organization of Consumers Union, International Organization for Standardization, Association of Official Analytical Chemists, etc. Now let's come to the Codex Commission. The Codex Commission was developed in 1962, subsidiary of Food and Agriculture Organization FAO, United Nations UN and World Health Organization WHO. It's a joint venture between FAO and WHO to formulate internationally accepted food safety standards for protection of human health and to ensure fair trade practices. What is the work of the Codex Commission? They help the coordination of all food standards or by initiation and supervision of draft standards, by helping through the finalization of food standards or the publication of standards worldwide, and amend standards in face of new technology. Now, the structure of a codex. How a codex is formed by the different bodies. So, the first of all, we have the intergovernmental body by open to all UN member nations. Currently, 165 members are there in the Codex Commission. Executive Committee oversees Commission activity. Secretariat oversees Executive Committee located in FAO in Rome. The Commission works in the 6 UN official languages, which means that codex are held. The commission or the meeting is generally held each year in Rome or Geneva, and the members are 165 members as we have talked. So now let's move to next slide. We have the codex objectives. There are 6 objectives. The first one is to protect the health of consumers and to ensure fair practices in the food trade, to coordinate all work regarding food standards, to determine the priorities, to initiate the preparation of standards, to publish the standards. Like the scope. What is the scope of the Codex Alimentarius in the foods? The Codex Alimentarius covers all foods, whether processed, semi-processed foods. The Codex Alimentarius contains general standards covering matters such as food labeling, food hygiene, food additives and pesticides, residues and procedures for assessing the safety of foods derived from modern technology. It also contains guidelines for the management of official so government import and export inspection and certification system for foods. Now the structure of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. How the commission is being formed from top to the bottom. Now let's see. We have an diagram. The first, it includes the executive committee and the secretariat plus the regional and the general committees, which followed up for the commodity committees and the task force by the active committee, ad HOC task force and the committees adjourned. Now the structure and management of Codex Alimentarius Commission. The first 3, as we have talked about, have the executive committee, the regional coordinating committees and the secretariat of the commission. Under the executive committee, we have 4 points, which includes as a few important persons to control the committee. The first one is the chairperson, and followed by 3 vice chairpersons and 7 regional representatives and 6 regional coordinators. For the regional coordinating committees, we have 6 regional committees for Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America and Caribbean, North America and South West Pacific, Near East. responsible for defining the problems and needs of the region, and they help in the responsible for coordination of activities. And the secretariat is responsible for the formulation and development of FAO, WHO standards, administrative support to the Commission, relations with the National Codex contact point. Now, as we can see here, the executive committee has divided the work based on the general, commodity, or task force. As you can see here, under the general committees we have the general principles on France, food labeling in Canada, pesticide residues like in China, Hungary, Germany, etc. Or in under commodity committees, which has been actively participate, have the fish and fishery products in Norway, in Malaysia, fats and oils, in Colombia, sugars, or in Mexico, fresh fruits and vegetables. The task force, which has been dissolved, include Switzerland animal feeding, Brazil fruit juices, Japan food derived from biotechnology. The regional coordinating committees like include from Africa, Asia, in India, Europe, Latin America, in the Caribbean, North America, and Southwest Pacific, as we have talked about it in the previous slides. Here are the points as we have mentioned. Now, the Codex committees on general issues. Codex committees generally works on the issues of food labeling, on the methods of analysis and sampling, on food hygiene, on pesticide residues, food additives and contaminants, export inspection and certification systems, nutrition and foods for special dietary uses, on residues of veterinary drugs in foods. So these are the 8 general issues which Codex committee have to act on. Now the food under the Codex. Any substance, whether processed, partly processed or raw, which is intended for human consumption and includes drinks, chewing gum and any substance which has been used in the manufacture, preparation or treatment of food, but does not include cosmetics, tobacco or substances used solely as drugs, which means the main task of the Codex Committee on Food Hygiene is to draft provisions on food hygiene that are relevant to all foods as well as provisions that are applied to specific food items or food groups. Means considering both the health and economic consequences of unsafe food, governments should give greater attention to prevention and control of food contamination at the more national level. And some of the Codex tools we have like Codex standards, Codex practices, and the guidelines and recommendations. Now let's see the legal tools more closely. A diagram resembling the step procedure for elaborating Codex standards, like from the start to the conclusion, from discussion paper, project document, like elaboration, proposed draft standard, comments, draft text, comments, critical review, And finally, the Codex standard. Now, what is Codex standards? The food requirements intended to provide consumers with a sound, wholesome food product free from adulteration, correctly labeled and presented. International acceptance, most important, considered next to safely. Prescribed format used to develop each standard must include name, scope, description, composition, quality factors, food additives, contaminants, hygiene, weights and measures, labeling and sampling. The solely purpose of the Codex standards is to stand upon the text shall or the revised or removed in accordance with the procedures for the elaboration of Codex standards and the related text of each member of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which is responsible for identifying and presenting to the appropriate committee. Now the codes of practice. Codes of practice include some advisory text issued to all the 165 members designed to assist members in achieving purposes of Codex. Individual members decide how to use the code, like for the hygiene requirements or the checklist of requirements for enforcement authorities. These are some of the points which the to perform the codex should follow, or the practices. Now the new guidelines and recommendations. Basic tools used to help member nations in elaborations of their standards to conform to Codex. No binding but accepted worldwide. Very useful to developing countries. Example, Code of Ethics for International Trade in Food, which means the food laws and regulations existed in some form to address consumers' concern, like with the standards or the codes for more than 200 of codex standard and 41 codes of practices. There are currently approximate 25 guideline levels for contaminants to adopt to date. So it has been proved to the United Nations contributing to international harmonization in the important area of food quality and safety. Like the text used by the government as part of their national food safety requirements, they are also used by commercial partners in specifying the grade and quality of consignments moving in international trade. So the next slide we have the food additives under the codex. Codex general standard for food additives, any substances not normally consumed as a food on its own and normally constituting a typical food ingredient, whether or not it has any nutritional value, the intentional addition of which to food for a technological purpose in the manufacturing or may reasonably be expected to result in it or its byproducts becoming component of or otherwise affecting the characteristics of such foods, like through determining whether processes are consistent with the general principles of food hygiene to avoid the possibility of microbial criteria being applied in the arbitrary and non-scientific manner. The risk assessment and describe the principles to be applied in establishing microbial criteria. These are some of the things where the food additives have to keep in mind under the Codex. Now the food labeling under Codex. Codex general standard for the labeling of prepacked foods recognize labeling as important to both objectives of Codex. The food labeling such as like any tag, brand, mark, pictorial or written printed stencil to a container of a food, like in Maggi or in canned paneer or in something like that. The food labeling has to supervised by the Codex. Now the food labeling requirements under Codex Alimentarius. So we require the name of the food, list of ingredients to the Codex, to net content and drained weight of the food, name and address of manufacturer from where it has been manufactured on a product has been developed, the country or region, lot identification, date marking and storage instructions, and the how to use the food to the people, the instruction to use the food. This has been to verified by the Codex Alimentarius under the food labeling section. These are some of the achievements by Codex. So they have 237 food standards, 43 codes of practice, 33 guidelines, 197 pesticides evaluated, 3,274 limits of pesticide residues, 289 limits of veterinary drug residues, 1300 food additives evaluated. Now let's talk about some of the relation between Codex and the International Organization for Standardization, or we can say ISO. The executive committee noted the information on ISO activities of relevance to Codex work as provided in the working documents in accordance with the decision of the 27th session of the Commission. Particular attention of the committee was drawn to the publication of ISO 22000, which was been implemented in 2005, which said the food safety management systems requirements for any organization in the food chain. Now, the next point is the coordination. For Near East expressed appreciation to the information provided and indicated that ISO work on food labeling and food packaging could also be the interest of the Commission, which we came to know that the coordination for continuation to exchange information between Codex and ISO. Not all Codex members participate in the work of ISO, like the governmental organization that given by the all limited resources available within Codex. All Codex committees and Codex members should not be overloaded by being systematically involved, even indirectly, in the standards development process of ISO. Now, as in the national region, we have the National Codex Committee, like it acts or helps as a consultative group to the government regarding the food labeling or food packaging, or to anything to change about the food issues or the adulteration issues. It helps in formulate the country response to the proposals of CAC. nominates delegates to represent the country at Codex meetings. It advises the government on the best possible decisions as regards Codex standards and their implementation, appoints such technical subcommittees, undertakes such other duties as may be advised by the government. So the committee, with satisfaction that the Codex Secretariat have been actively seeking contribution in the areas of work of the commissions where there was a scope for continued or improved cooperation, the committee reaffirmed the need to continue a strength and cooperation in such areas as animal production, food safety, and food assessment of foods derived from recombination of the animal. So that's how the National Codex Committee works on every single area where the codex has been placed. Here are some of the references I have used to create the previous slides. Thanking you.